I used to say out of spite that after my divorce, I would find someone better and travel the world with my dog. Since moving to a small town in Georgia, life has become unexpectedly peaceful and free, without the need to check in with anyone or compromise my own happiness. Having survived a past where I was treated like a backup plan and a convenience, I finally set my boundaries and learned to put myself first. My wife was playing truth or dare at our high school reunion. Her first love, Ethan Bennett, stared at her for a long time before suddenly asking if she would have had kids if she had married him instead. Ava just laughed and said that she absolutely would have. Everyone in the room knew my wife insisted on being child-free. They also knew I had a vasectomy 5 years ago just to honor her wishes. The room went dead silent as everyone waited to see how I would react. I simply offered a faint smile and suggested that since they clearly still had feelings for each other, we should probably just find a time to finalize a divorce. I was surprised when I got a voice message from Ava Miller telling me to get dressed up and pick her up for a reunion dinner. A week ago, an emergency meeting at work caused me to be 10 minutes late for our date. Ava had been giving me the cold shoulder ever since that night. She stopped calling and wouldn't reply to my texts, eventually moving her things into the guest room. Every time we crossed paths at the house, she looked like she was on the verge of an outburst. After 5 years of marriage, I knew her temperament well enough to know she would never be the one to apologize first. I was always the one who caved during our arguments. I would usually be the one to apologize and cheer her up just to move past the drama. Since this was the first time she had reached out during one of her silences, I assumed she was offering me an olive branch. I figured if I played my cards right and showed some affection, she might finally let us make up. That thought made me feel a bit of relief from the tension of the past week. Ava had nearly exhausted my patience lately, yet I still found it impossible to stay mad at her. My only move was to keep trying to please her and walk on eggshells to keep her happy. I was worried that if I missed this chance, Ava might never treat me with kindness again. I immediately asked my boss for the afternoon off and drove straight to the luxury mall downtown. Ava had been eyeing a Louis Vuitton bag for months. Every time we walked past the boutique, she would try it on and admire it in the mirror, clearly reluctant to leave it behind. The $8,000 price tag had always held us back. I stood at the counter for what felt like an eternity, staring at that leather. Finally, I just went for it and swiped my credit card. I told myself that if it made Ava happy, every penny was worth it. With a shopping bag in hand, I hurried back toward our place. It was still early enough to beat the Seattle rush hour, and the traffic was moving smoothly. As I approached the final intersection, I sent Ava a quick iMessage. I told her I would be there in a few minutes and that she should get ready to head down because I had a surprise for her. I pulled up to the entrance of our apartment complex and checked my phone. The message screen was still showing my last text with no response from her. I decided not to nag her and instead use the time to catch up on some lingering emails. Being one of the senior staff members at the firm, the partners had always treated me with respect. They gave me regular raises and never questioned my time off requests. Because they were so good to me, I made it a point to never let my work slide. I set my phone down and immersed myself in the spreadsheets on my laptop. James, unlock the door. A sudden, loud banging on the window startled me. I looked up to see Ava standing there with a scowl on her face that looked as dark as a thundercloud. "Don't be mad. Honey, it's my fault," I said, forcing a smile as I unlocked the doors. She climbed in, complaining that I had already ruined her mood. She asked why I was so inconsiderate as to make her walk out in the heat instead of waiting for her in the shaded garage. Ava kept grumbling as she settled into the passenger seat. I didn't say anything, but I reached into the back and pulled out the gift. I told her she looked stunning, just like the day we met. Back then, she had also been wearing a white dress that made her look so elegant and captivating. I told her I finally bought her the bag she had been wanting and asked if she liked it. As soon as she saw the luxury packaging, her expression softened and a small smile appeared. She teased me by saying she already knew she was beautiful and didn't need me to tell her. I leaned in and jokingly asked if the bag was worth at least one kiss. Ava hesitated for a second before gently pushing my head away, telling me to stop being silly because we couldn't be late for the reunion. I didn't push the issue, assuming she was still a little annoyed with me. Fine, let's head out then, I said as I opened the GPS on my phone. My heart sank when I saw the destination. I asked her why the dinner was so far away, since we usually stayed in the city center, but this place was way out in the suburbs near the airport. An uneasy look crossed Ava's face for a second. She started to stutter, claiming they just wanted to try somewhere new for a change. She told me to stop questioning everything and just follow the plan since the reservation was already made. By the time she finished, her voice was sharp with irritation. I didn't want to start another fight, so I just dropped it and kept driving. We arrived at the venue about an hour later, just as things were starting. Most of our old classmates were already there. I held Ava's hand as we entered the ballroom and found a quiet table in the corner to catch up with a few people. One of our old friends, a guy named Ethan Wilson, threw an arm around my shoulder and asked if Ava and I were ever going to have kids. I gave him a polite smile and said we weren't planning on it. I explained that we enjoyed our freedom and weren't ready for the chaos of parenthood. That makes sense, Ethan said before turning to Ava to ask if she simply didn't like children. She was staring down at the table and didn't seem to hear him at all. I nudged her gently to get her attention. She looked up so abruptly that she looked startled, almost as if she were hiding a secret. Sorry, what was that? I wasn't listening, she stammered. Ethan let out a forced laugh and changed the subject, remarking that our birth control must be top-notch since we had never had an accident in 5 years. Since we were all nearing our 30s, people were pretty open about discussing these things. I was about to say something, but Ava cut me off. She told everyone that I had a vasectomy and that I had promised to do it back when we first started dating. She even added that she never would have married me if I hadn't agreed to it. Ava looked incredibly smug as she spoke, seemingly unaware of how humiliating it was for me to have my private medical history announced. The room got awkward, and Ethan just laughed nervously, giving me a look that felt like he was mocking me. I kept my mouth shut and swallowed my pride, not knowing how to respond. Ava didn't even look at me to see if I was okay. She stood up and told everyone she had to go pick someone up and would be back shortly. I reached out and grabbed her hand without thinking, not even processing who she was going to get. Stop it, Ava said, shaking my hand off with a look of annoyance. As I watched her walk away, a sense of dread washed over me. I lost all interest in the conversation around me and sat there feeling incredibly restless and anxious. Almost everyone from our class was already there. Knowing Ava's personality, there was only one person she would go out of her way to pick up, and that was Ethan Bennett. A feeling of total defeat hit me. It had been years, yet I still couldn't escape the shadow he cast over my life. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid and that she might just be picking up a female friend I hadn't met yet. I told myself to trust her. I wrestled with my thoughts for a while before finally sending her an iMessage to ask if she had found the person and when she would be back. I waited 10 minutes, but there was no response. I couldn't just sit there anymore. I grabbed my keys and hurried toward the entrance. Just as I got to the door, I saw Ava walking toward me, holding hand with Ethan Bennett. When she spotted me, she looked away and quickly let go of his hand. James, Ethan flew in from London just for the reunion, so I went to the airport to get him, she said, telling me not to overthink it. Picking him up? I had never heard of someone needing to hold hands with their ride from the airport. The lie was so pathetic that I didn't even bother to challenge it. Ethan gave me a casual smile and told me not to get the wrong idea. He mentioned that since he and Ava were each other's first loves, it was perfectly natural for her to pick him up. Even though he was supposedly explaining himself, his tone was incredibly condescending and felt like a deliberate provocation. I didn't want to make a scene in public. Ava told me to just go inside and then shove one of Ethan's suitcases into my hands, telling me to help him because he had too much to carry alone. I almost laughed out of pure frustration, realizing she was treating me like their personal bellhop. Thanks for the help, James, Ethan said with a smirk that made my skin crawl. Since we were standing at the entrance with people everywhere, I couldn't find the words to argue. I just took the bag and followed them in. Several people rushed over to greet Ethan as soon as we entered the ballroom, asking him how he liked living in the UK. I dropped the bags and went back to our table to take my seat. Instead of joining me, Ava sat down right next to Ethan. Ava suggested we play truth or dare because she thought just eating was boring. Everyone agreed, since these reunions could drag on for hours and needed something to liven things up. The energy in the room picked up immediately. Ethan had the waiter bring over a spinning wheel and set it in the center of the table. For the first few rounds, people chose dares like calling an ex or confessing feelings to someone they disliked. The table was filled with laughter and shouting. Then the wheel slowed down and landed on Ava. I held my breath to see what she would pick. She chose truth and pulled a card from the deck. She read it aloud, which asked how she felt about her current life. She said she was very satisfied with her life. She told the group that most women her age were already tied down with kids or even having a second one. And frankly, she looked down on that. She asked why anyone would choose to ruin their lives like that when they could just live for themselves instead of suffering through parenthood. She pointed out that she didn't have to work and had someone to provide for her, allowing her to spend her time at spas and salons. She asked if any of the mothers in the room could honestly say they looked as young or as polished as she did. The room went silent after she finished speaking. I wasn't surprised by the awkward silence, since almost everyone at the table, except us, had children. Ava's arrogant attitude had clearly rubbed people the wrong way. Ethan Wilson tried to break the tension with a forced, uncomfortable laugh. Ethan tried to smooth things over by saying that the child-free life I shared with Ava did seem pretty relaxed. He kept smiling, trying to get the game moving again. He was just about to spin the wheel when a sharp, cold laugh came from the other side of the table. One of the women asked Ava when she was going to pay for everyone's gas and Uber rides since she was so wealthy. I was confused and asked why travel expenses were even being brought up, since we never did that at past reunions. The woman gave me a look and told me to ask my wife. She explained that Ava was the one who insisted on this remote location and promised she would pay for everyone's transportation. She added that while $60 might be nothing to us, it was a lot to her. Ava looked like she wanted to disappear. Ava snapped that it was only a few dollars and told the woman to stop making a scene. I looked at her in disbelief and asked why she hadn't talked to me about it first. She glared at me and called me selfish, arguing that Ethan had just been on a 10-hour flight and obviously deserved to have the dinner somewhere convenient for him. Before I could respond, Ethan Wilson patted my shoulder and told us to move on. He announced that for the next round, the winner could pick anyone at the table and ask them any question they wanted. Everyone perked up at the prospect of some real drama, and the energy in the room shifted again. The wheel spun for a few seconds before landing on Ethan's name. People cheered and joked about his beginner's luck since he just got back. Ethan sat there for a moment before a slow, calculated smile spread across his face. Everyone egged him on to pick someone and get some juicy secrets. The room was loud with anticipation. Ethan looked up and let his gaze rest on Ava. My heart skipped a beat, and I found myself holding my breath. I had no idea what he was going to say. Ava, I heard you decided to be child-free and haven't had any kids in your 5 years with James, he said. Ava nodded in confirmation. Then Ethan leaned in and asked if she would have been willing to have kids if she had married him instead. Time seemed to freeze, and I could feel my pulse racing. I wanted her answer, and so did everyone else at the table. Of course I would, she said without a second of hesitation. She added that having children with the person you love is a beautiful thing. Her words hit me like a physical blow to the face, instantly shattering every bit of love and devotion I had shown her for the last 5 years. The room went completely silent again. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, some filled with pity while others were clearly enjoying the drama. Ava seemed to finally realize what she had done and started to stammer out an explanation, telling me not to take it the wrong way. Don't, I said, cutting her off. I closed my eyes, feeling a hollow ache in my chest as if my heart had been ripped out. It was clear now that the last 5 years meant nothing to her. After a long moment, I opened my eyes and managed to force a painful smile. Ava, since you and Ethan are so perfect for each other, I think we should just figure out a time to get a divorce, I told her. She stared at me in utter shock and asked if I had completely lost my mind. In Ava's world, I was the loyal, spineless husband who would always follow her around and cater to her every whim. I was done being her lapdog. I didn't even bother to give her an explanation before I grabbed my keys and walked out of the room. I sat in the car for a while, trying to push down the rage that was boiling inside me. I actually told myself that if she came out to find me, I would forgive her and pretend the whole night never happened. I waited and waited, but she never walked through those doors. I sighed and lit a cigarette, but put it out after one puff because I remembered how much Ava hated the smell of smoke in the car. Eventually, I gave up on her, started the engine, and drove home alone. When I walked through the door, my golden retriever, Buddy, was waiting for me on the rug. Buddy started circling my legs and wagging her tail like crazy before jumping into my arms. I had found her as a stray on my way to work a few years ago. Ava had always complained that she was an ugly mutt and never really liked having her around. I had only been allowed to keep her after promising that I would take care of all the feeding and grooming myself. I pet her soft head and felt some of the tension leave my body. I sat down on the floor and asked her if she knew what was actually real in this world, finally letting my emotions take over. I would be lying if I said I didn't care about our years together. Every memory of us felt like a thorn pressing into my chest, leaving me numb with pain. I honestly couldn't tell you when things started to go so wrong between us. I realized then that to Ava, I was probably just a placeholder for the man she actually wanted. No matter how much I loved her, I was just someone she settled for. A lump formed in my throat, and before I knew it, I was crying uncontrollably. I didn't understand why I was being so emotional. Even when I was broke and struggling to pay rent years ago, I had never shed a single tear. Buddy seemed to sense my pain and snuggled into my lap, whimpering softly as she licked the tears off my face. Her affection made me let out a small laugh, and the heavy feeling in my chest started to lift. I told myself that love is just a luxury and not something I needed to survive. I decided to stop worrying about whether she loved me and just let it all go. I grabbed a fresh towel and went to take a shower. The hot water felt like it was washing away more than just the dirt. It felt like it was cleansing my soul. By the time I was finished, it was nearly midnight and I was exhausted. My mind finally started to shut down and push the painful memories away. I collapsed onto the sofa and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I have no idea how long I was out before I felt a heavy weight on my chest that made it hard to breathe. I sat up and saw Ava slumped over me with her face flushed and her hair a mess. Her heels were kicked off in the middle of the room, and the smell of alcohol was overwhelming. I gently lifted her head and tried to shift her over so I could stand up. As I moved, she started to wake up and clung to me even tighter. She started mumbling that she couldn't live without me and begged me not to leave. I felt a sudden pang of hope and my heart ached for her. I tried to convince myself that after 5 years, she must still care for me in her own way. I didn't think she could just throw everything away so easily. I let out a soft laugh and began to stroke her hair gently. "Ethan, please don't go. I'll be whatever you want," she whispered. Hearing his name shattered my heart all over again, and I felt like I was falling through the floor. Every bit of warmth I felt a moment ago turned into a cold, hard realization that she wasn't talking to me. She never loved me at all. My anger flared up, and I couldn't stop myself from shaking her awake and telling her to get off of me. She looked up with blurry eyes and started complaining that I had hurt her, whining about how I hadn't waited for her at the restaurant. I just laughed at the absurdity of it. Even now, she was trying to make herself the victim. I shoved her to the other end of the couch and grabbed my phone to go to the bedroom. In the past, I would have stayed up to make her tea and help her get ready for bed, but I was done with that. I finally saw her for who she really was. If she didn't love me, then I needed to move on and find my own peace. After everything that had happened, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to get back to sleep. I just stared into the darkness for hours until my eyes started to burn. By the time the first light of morning started to peek through the blinds, it was already 5 o'clock. I realized I wasn't going to get any more rest, so I just got up and started getting ready for work. Ava was still passed out on the couch when I went to the kitchen. Her hair was a bird's nest, and her mascara was smeared all over her face. I didn't even acknowledge her as I grabbed my things and left. I used to make her breakfast every morning, even if it meant I would be late, but those days were over. I was done wasting my energy on someone who didn't care about me. The roads were empty so early in the morning. I made it to the office in half the usual time. I grabbed a coffee and a croissant from the break room and got straight to work on my desk. Having a background in finance made my daily tasks second nature to me. Without Ava calling me every hour to complain about something, I was able to get through my entire morning workload before lunch. When I finally checked my phone, I saw a dozen missed messages from her. I rubbed my temples and started reading through her texts. She was complaining that I hadn't helped her with her makeup and that her skin was ruined. She went on about how her back was sore from sleeping on the couch and how inconsiderate I was for leaving her there. She asked how we were supposed to survive if I was going to be so petty. She even said that the only reason she had stayed with me for so long was because I used to treat her well. She told me she couldn't take it anymore if I was going to stop making her breakfast and caring about her needs. The screen was just a wall of complaints and insults. I felt a deep sense of exhaustion and couldn't even bring myself to finish reading. Ava was so arrogant that she truly believed I would never have the guts to leave her. The truth was, I did love her with all my heart right up until the moment she said Ethan's name. We met during our freshman year of college while volunteering. I used to sign up for every community service event just to get the extra credits. When I first saw Ava, it felt like a scene out of a movie. She had long, flowing dark hair and was wearing a simple white sundress that made her look ethereal. She had this poised, distant beauty that made her seem like she belonged in another world. Her smile was like a rare flower blooming in the wild, and I was hooked from the start. I started going to every single volunteer event just for the chance to be near her for a few minutes. Ava was always very reserved and didn't talk much to the other students. Even though she was stunning, her cold attitude kept most people at a distance. We only actually became friends by total accident when we were assigned to the same group for a hiking trip. The weather turned bad unexpectedly, and a massive storm rolled in while we were on the trail. Ava and I got separated from the rest of the group in the downpour. She wasn't an experienced hiker and hadn't brought the right gear, and her flashlight died almost immediately in the rain. I gave her my raincoat and held her close to keep her warm throughout the night. I stayed awake until the search party finally found us the next afternoon. As a thank you for keeping her safe, she offered to take me out to dinner. She got drunk that night and started crying, thinking I was Ethan Bennett. She kept asking if he was the one who sent me to save her, convinced that he still loved her. That was the moment I unknowingly became his stand-in. We started dating shortly after that night. I never mentioned Ethan because I was just happy to be with her, even if it was as a substitute. For 5 years, I gave her everything, hoping that eventually she would forget about him and love me for who I am. I just wanted her to see me for once. But that hope died at the reunion. I finally realized that no matter what I did, I would never have a place in her heart. I knew right then that I had to let her go. I couldn't force her to love me, but I never expected to come home from work and find Ethan Bennett sitting at my dining table. They were laughing and eating together, looking so comfortable that it felt like I was the intruder in my own home. Ava looked surprised to see me for a second before she went right back to her usual arrogant self. She started berating me for not answering my phone and complained that I hadn't made her breakfast that morning. She told me I might as well have just died out there for all she cared. Buddy ran over and started barking at them. I took a deep breath and tried to stay calm, asking Ava why Ethan was in our house. I asked her if she had any respect left for me as her husband at all. Ava just looked at me with total disgust before walking into the bedroom and throwing a suitcase at my feet. She told me Ethan needed a place to stay while he was back in town and that she wasn't going to let him waste money on a hotel. She said if I didn't like it, I could leave and take the dog with me. She claimed Ethan was allergic to dogs and she didn't want him to be uncomfortable in our home. I couldn't believe she was saying this with a straight face. I told her there was no way I was leaving the house that I had worked so hard to pay for, and if anyone was leaving, it was going to be them. Ethan just sat there looking like a smug winner while Ava laughed in my face. She reminded me that her name was the only one on the deed. She didn't care that I had paid for everything. She said she was the owner and she would decide who got to stay there. She told me to take my dog and get out right now. It was unbelievable how she was using the love I gave her as a weapon against me. I was ready to explode, but I forced myself to stay calm. I told her fine, we would get a divorce, and to meet me at the courthouse the next morning. Ava didn't say anything, but I saw a flicker of worry in her eyes before she masked it with her usual coldness. I grabbed Buddy and my suitcase and walked out the door, leaving behind the house we had shared for 5 years. It was already late in the evening, so I had no choice but to take Buddy to a nearby Marriott. Lying in that cold hotel bed, I felt like a complete and utter failure for the first time in my life. I had given her everything, and she had just thrown me away like garbage. I felt like a side character in someone else's story, someone who only existed to make the lead couple look better. I let out a bitter laugh and blocked Ava on everything. I was done letting her hurt me. The next morning, I took the day off and started looking for a new apartment where Buddy and I could start over. I spent the whole day searching and finally found a decent little place in a good neighborhood. I was exhausted, and poor Buddy was panting from all the walking. I filled her bowl with food and some water before collapsing into a chair. I was scrolling through my phone while Buddy ate when I got an iMessage from an old friend, Hannah Wilson. She was asking me if the rumors about the divorce were actually true. She sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post Ava had just put up. It was a picture of her and Ethan Bennett holding hands at a movie theater with a caption about finally being back where she belonged. After everything she had done, seeing that post didn't even hurt anymore. They just looked pathetic to me. I told Hannah that I was definitely getting a divorce, because only a coward would stay after being treated like that. Hannah sent me a sympathetic emoji, but I didn't bother responding. A week had passed since I moved out, and I hadn't heard a word from Ava. I honestly doubted she even noticed I had blocked her. I didn't care what she thought anymore. I had sent her one last text about the divorce papers before I blocked her, and she had ignored it. If she wanted to play games, I was happy to let my lawyer handle it from here on out. Life without Ava was a breath of fresh air. I no longer had to worry about whether she had eaten or sacrificed my career goals just to satisfy her latest whim. I honestly thought I had closed that chapter of my life for good. My plans for a quiet evening changed when I saw her waiting outside my apartment. I was heading home to walk Buddy when I spotted Ava standing in the courtyard. She was wearing that same white dress and clutching a thermos like her life depended on it. Her eyes welled up with tears the moment she saw me. I had zero interest in another dramatic encounter and tried to walk right past her. Before I could make my escape, she reached out and grabbed my wrist to stop me. I turned around with a sigh of frustration. Ava wiped her eyes and stared at me with a pained expression, asking if I ever planned on reaching out to her. She sounded hurt that I tried to ignore her existence entirely. I wasn't falling for her victim act anymore, so I shook her off and headed for the stairs. She scrambled after me, her voice breaking as she cried out for me to wait. She claimed she had even burned her hand making me soup and asked how I could be so heartless. I stopped and looked her dead in the eye. I asked her if she felt sorry for me when she told everyone she wanted to have Ethan Bennett's babies. I asked if she cared about my feelings when she threw me out of my own house and told her that nothing she said now mattered. Ava went silent as a flicker of guilt crossed her face, but she followed me inside anyway. Buddy came running to the door, wagging her tail to welcome me home. Trying to break the tension, Ava made some clicking sounds to get the dog's attention. Buddy completely ignored her and retreated to the corner of the living room. Ava gave a forced, awkward laugh and set the thermos down on the table. She opened it and urged me to try the soup she had made. I was completely out of patience and told her I didn't have the energy for her games. I asked her what she was really doing there. With tears in her eyes, she told me she had finally realized that I was the one she actually loved. She asked if we could just go back to the way things were, because I was her perfect match. I didn't even know how to respond to that level of delusion. To me, her sudden change of heart felt as cheap and meaningless as a weed. When I stayed silent, she got desperate and grabbed my hand. She confessed that Ethan Bennett was a fraud who had a secret family back in London. He had managed to scam her out of her entire life savings before disappearing. She begged me to help her and promised she would be devoted only to me from now on. I just laughed in her face, thinking about all the years I spent taking care of her. I only did those things because I loved her, but that man was long gone. Hearing her beg for sympathy now just felt pathetic. I told her that her story sounded like a bad joke and that she had brought all of this on herself. I reminded her that half of the money she lost was actually mine. I told her to pay me back, or she would be hearing from my lawyer very soon. I started ushering her toward the door and shoved the thermos back into her hands. I told her we would definitely be seeing each other again. For a second, a spark of hope lit up her eyes. I crushed that hope instantly by telling her I meant at the courthouse for our divorce. I also warned her to look out for a process server because she was being sued. The light in her eyes died out right then and there. She stumbled out of my apartment, clutching the soup like a ghost. As she left, she told me she loved me and promised to wait for me if I ever changed my mind. I didn't even bother to respond before I slammed the door at her face. Once Ava was out of the picture, my life finally got back on track. I poured all my energy into my career at the firm and stayed so busy that I didn't have time to dwell on the past. However, I noticed a strange energy in the office when I walked in this morning. My coworkers were whispering and glancing at me as I walked to the break room. I assumed it was just the usual office gossip and tried to ignore it. I had no idea that a total nightmare was waiting for me right outside the front doors. A huge crowd had gathered near the entrance of the building. As I pushed through the onlookers, I saw Ava Miller and her frenemy, Hannah Miller, holding a massive banner. It read that I was abandoning my pregnant wife and our unborn child. People were stopping to watch the scene and film with their phones. Ava spotted me and ran over to grab my arm, but I pulled away. She leaned in close and whispered that she was sorry, but she didn't have any other choice to get me back. She told me she couldn't live without me and had faked the pregnancy just to get my attention. She begged me not to hate her and promised to tell everyone the truth if I would just take her back. She even said she was ready to have a family with me now. When I didn't say anything, Hannah Miller stepped in with a fake look of outrage. She started screaming at me, calling me a deadbeat for trying to walk away from my own child. She was really putting on a show for the crowd. Hannah kept shouting about how much Ava had sacrificed for me and asked where my conscience was. My head was pounding, and I couldn't believe I was being subjected to this public humiliation. Because I was too stunned to speak, the people around us started to assume the accusations were true. I looked at Ava and asked how anyone could even be sure the kid was mine. Hannah jumped in, telling me to stop acting innocent and asking how I could hurt someone as wonderful as Ava. I could tell Hannah was getting nervous because her voice started to waver. I turned to Hannah and asked if her secret affair with that older guy was as exciting as she hoped. Her face went pale instantly, and she tried to claim I was making things up. I told her she knew exactly what I was talking about. Oh, and by the way, I just sent those compromising photos of you and those older guys at the hotel to your husband, I said as I waved my phone at her with a knowing smirk. I actually had Ava to thank for spilling the tea on Hannah's infidelity. On the surface, the two of them acted like inseparable best friends, but Ava spent plenty of time trash-talking her whenever she was alone with me. Ava once complained to me about how Hannah's perfect marriage was a total sham because she was seeing a wealthy older man on the side. I didn't think much of it at the time, but it turned out to be the perfect weapon today. Since they wanted to humiliate me in front of the whole world, I decided to give them a real show. I was totally bluffing about the photos and didn't even have her husband's number, but I knew I had hit a nerve. Hannah's face twisted in shock as she turned toward Ava. She demanded to know how I found out about a secret she had only shared with her. Ava looked guilty for the first time and couldn't even look her friend in the eye. She stammered that she hadn't meant to let it slip and was surprised I remembered it. Hannah lost it completely and lunged at Ava, grabbing her by the hair as they both went crashing to the ground. Hannah screamed that Ava was a hypocrite who was just as rotten as anyone else. She yelled that Ava was the one who cheated first and had no right to judge her. Then she shouted for everyone to hear that the baby wasn't even mine, but belonged to Ava's first love, Ethan Bennett. Hannah revealed that Ava had begged for help to pin the pregnancy on me just to save her own reputation. She cursed herself for being stupid enough to help a backstabber like Ava. Being the much larger woman, Hannah easily overpowered Ava and pinned her to the concrete. Hannah started landing heavy blows until Ava was sobbing on the ground. The entire area was in total chaos as onlookers gasped in horror. In a final fit of rage, Hannah kicked Ava hard in the stomach, and blood began to soak through Ava's white dress. None of the bystanders tried to stop the fight. They just stood there recording everything on their phones. Eventually, building security called 911 and an ambulance took Ava away. The entire incident was posted on TikTok and went viral within hours, causing a massive scandal. People online started digging into Ava and Ethan Bennett's past and exposed every dirty detail of their lives. They became the top trending topic on Twitter and were absolutely shredded by the public. By the time I saw Ava again, her family had committed her to a psychiatric facility. After her personal information was leaked, she was bombarded with death threats and hateful messages around the clock. People were even mailing her razors and telling her she deserved to die. After several failed suicide attempts, her parents decided that a locked psychiatric ward was the only way to keep her safe. The polished and beautiful woman I once knew was completely gone when I visited her. She was wearing a tattered hospital gown with her face red and swollen from crying. She looked tiny and broken as she sat shivering in the corner of her bed. Her eyes were hollow, but a faint spark appeared when she saw me walk through the door. She managed a weak and painful smile as she told me she never expected to see me again. She whispered an apology, claiming she never intended for things to end up this way. I pulled the final divorce papers and a pen out of my bag and set them on her bedside table. I told her this would be the last time we ever spoke. I just needed her signature so we could finally be done with each other for good. Ava tried to smile through her tears as she asked if I truly didn't care about her anymore. She admitted that being with Ethan Bennett was a mistake and said she had already paid a heavy price for it. She begged me to move past what happened and give her one last chance at forgiveness. I kept my voice calm since she was in a fragile state, but I stayed firm. I told her that my love for her died the second she said she wanted Ethan's children. I explained that she had slowly drained every bit of affection I had for her over the years until there was nothing left. I asked her how she could expect me to just forget the pain she caused. I reminded her of the difference between how I had treated her and how she had treated me. I told her that if I could go back in time, I would choose to never meet her at all. The light vanished from her eyes as she gave me a final, empty smile and signed the papers. She whispered a wish for my happiness as I tucked the documents away. I felt an incredible sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted off my chest, and I simply wished her the same. Once the legal work was finished, I requested a transfer to our office in Savannah, Georgia. I needed to get away from Seattle and all the painful memories it held. A week later, Buddy and I were on a plane heading south to start a new life. My life in Georgia quickly settled into a peaceful routine of work, long walks with Buddy, and quiet dinners at home. I was finally happy. Then, after the winter passed, a letter arrived from up north with Ava's name on the return address. I had no idea how she tracked me down, but I eventually decided to open it. The letter began by saying that by the time I read it, she would likely be gone. She wrote about the crushing depression that had consumed her since I left. She described her days in the hospital as a blur of misery where she did nothing but dream of our past. She wrote about the night we were trapped on the mountain during the storm and how I had kept her warm. She remembered how I gave her my jacket and held her through the night to keep her safe. Those memories were the only thing that brought her any comfort in her dark room. She expressed deep regret for never appreciating the love I gave her and for being the one to destroy our marriage. She admitted that she had taken an overdose of sleeping pills because she just wanted the pain to stop. She wrote that she wanted to stay in that dream of us forever. Waking up to a world where I was gone was more than she could handle. In her dreams, she could still feel my warmth and pretend that I still loved her. She wished she had simply died in my arms that night on the mountain, so she could have left this world knowing she was loved. She wrote about how she would change everything if she could go back to the start of our marriage. She said she would forget about being child-free and would have given me the family I always wanted. She wished she could tell her past self to stay away from Ethan Bennett and to never hurt me. She finally realized that I was the only man who had ever truly cared for her. She knew now that I was the only one she could have ever trusted with her life. Since she couldn't change the past, she felt that ending her life was the only way to escape her mistakes. She didn't expect my forgiveness, but hoped that in another life, I might give her a second chance. She promised that if she had another life, she would spend it truly loving me. She mentioned that she had never touched the money in the joint account I set up. She had actually added her own savings to it and arranged for a friend to transfer the total back to me. She told me I had spent too much of my life taking care of her and that it was finally time for me to live for myself. She encouraged me to travel and see the world, visiting all the places we never got to see together. She also asked me to take extra good care of Buddy and buy her the best food. She called it her final gift to the dog she never treated right. She ended the letter by saying goodbye and wishing that I would find someone who loved me as much as I had loved her. I set the letter down and felt surprisingly calm as I reached down to pet Buddy. I knew that my life was finally moving in the right direction. After 5 years of sacrifice and a vasectomy, James was rewarded with nothing but betrayal. He eventually realized that no amount of devotion can make someone love you if their heart is already somewhere else. Ava's regret came far too late to mean anything. True happiness isn't found in someone else's approval. It starts with learning to love yourself.